On a late rainy night of March 13, 1836, a group of tired and scared individuals stumbled into the camp of General Sam Houston, who has been assembling an army to march to the Alamo's aid. Among them are two black men and a white woman holding a baby. Once the shadowy group converses with the officer on duty, he quickly ushers the woman into the headquarters tent as fast as possible with terror in his eyes. A growing number of soldiers start to gather around the tent, all curious to know what the commotion is about. While they talk amongst themselves, one of the soldiers recognized a woman as Susanna Dickinson, the wife of Alamo Dickinson, a soldier stationed in the Alamo. After about 30 minutes of anxiously waiting in the rain, an adjutant of General Houston walks out to inform the crowd. In a shaky voice, the officer declares, "The Alamo has fallen, and the entire garrison has been killed." Gasps are heard. The entire group is stunned. They are unable to fathom that the Alamo garrison being destroyed. Some start to think of their friends or family members who are stationed there. As the group starts to acknowledge the truth, many ponder where Santa Anna will go next. Once there's a break in the commotion, the officer speaks up again. "Pack all your belongings and burn whatever you can't take. We leave in 30 minutes. When one of the soldiers asks about the urgency, the officer responds, "Santa Anna is on his way here." Today's video is sponsored by NordVPN, a regular and trusted sponsor of the channel. You can get NordVPN today by clicking on my link nordvpn.com/warhawk down in the description. I never venture online without using NordVPN. I always want to keep my information safe from malware, trackers, and ads as I surf the internet. All the traffic I generate online is protected with robust encryption, ensuring my data is completely safe from prying eyes. Thanks to NordVPN, if my information is ever leaked, I will be notified immediately and can use Nord's kill switch if it is ever exposed. That is a wonder of NordVPN. At the moment, NordVPN is having a special offer where if you sign up with NordVPN today, you will receive 4 extra months on a 2-year plan. If you're still not satisfied with the service, you are guaranteed your money back within 30 days of your purchase. So go ahead, get NordVPN today and see how it protects your data as you surf the internet. Thanks again to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. If you want to get NordVPN today, you can get it by clicking on my link nordvpn.com/warhawk down in the description. The Alamo has fallen. Word of its destruction spreads terror throughout the rest of Texas. Houston knows that his army of 374 men is neither large nor experienced enough to contend with Santa Anna's grizzled veterans in a general engagement. The only course of action is to withdraw in the face of this unimaginable calamity. Retreating will also give him time to gather his forces and shape up his volunteers into a respectable fighting force to eventually make a stand against the Mexican regulars. With no fortifications to rely upon, Houston has to use the terrain to his advantage. Each river he crosses will be another barrier between his men and Santa Anna. The general orders his men to burn Gonzales, ditch their cannons in the Guadalupe River, and withdraw east towards more favorable ground. Houston also calls on every available Texian to join his ranks, even including Fannin and Goliad, with a force of 450 men. If he can link up with the men from Goliad, Houston will double his force, which will provide a major obstacle to any Mexican advance. Even if he can gather an army, the open prairies of South Texas are no place for his riflemen. He needs to bring his men to the densely wooded land of East Texas, a landscape his American frontiersmen are accustomed to. No longer will his men scatter their forces in front of a larger foe. He will keep his men together. He must keep his men mobile. If he loses his army now, just after a calamity such as the Alamo, the Republic of Texas will be lost. As the orders go out for the retreat, the volunteers berate Houston for his decision. Many joined up to fight the Mexicans, not run from their enemy. The men of Houston's army have grown up with the indomitable spirit from the American frontier. They join Houston's army out of patriotism. If the general does not command their respect, they will leave without looking back. Houston, just like his men, was raised in the same frontier lifestyle. Due to his career in the army and in politics, he has grown accustomed to having his orders obeyed. As they race east, these two similar yet different sets of personalities will clash for predominance. For now, the men grudgingly obey their commander and march east. As the soldiers withdraw east, so do the civilians. No longer able to protect them from centralist raiding parties, Houston orders all non-combatants to burn anything they can't take and evacuate towards the safety of Louisiana. People grab whatever they can carry and destroy everything else, hoping to prevent their belongings from falling into the hands of the Mexican troops. As the news filters east, more and more people join in this frenzied retreat towards the United States. Many of these people will not stop fleeing east until they arrive in Louisiana. After the war, this mass migration eastward will be known as the Runaway Scrape. After 4 days of marching, the men reached the Colorado River at Burnham's Crossing on March 17th. Upon arriving at the crossing, Houston initially thought the site ideal to fight the Mexicans. He soon realizes even if he stops Santa Anna's army at Burnham's Crossing, Urrea, who is marching along the coast, will easily flank his position. With that in mind, Houston destroys the crossing and marches south to Beesam's Crossing. 2 days later, Houston's men arrive at Beesam's Crossing just as the spring rains bring mud and swelling rivers, making the Colorado impassable. After the news of the Alamo circulated around Texas, veterans and newcomers alike flocked to Houston's banner to take on this new threat, increasing his strength to 1,400 men. With a sizable army and an impassable river at hand, Houston uses his time to train his men. Just as the Texians become comfortable at Beesam's Crossing, a Mexican force appears on the opposite side of the swollen river, looking for a fight. On March 14th, 8 days after the fall of the Alamo, Santa Anna receives reports that Houston's army destroyed Gonzales and retreated east. However, Santa Anna has no idea where Houston is heading. To find this last rebel army, Santa Anna splits his army into smaller forces to drive all the Anglo-Americans out of Texas. To the north, he sends Guyana towards Nacogdoches. To the east, he sends Ramirez y Sesma and Tolosa towards Gonzales. All the while, Urrea continues the lightning drive along the coast. Meanwhile, the general himself remains in Behar until Houston's army is located. With Urrea's rapid advance up the coast, the Texians lost all the ports except for Galveston. Ever since the Mexicans had been driven from the state the previous year, the small Texian navy has reigned supreme along the coast, preventing the Mexican officials from using the coastal ports to deliver supplies and reinforcements. Now, with many of the ports back in Mexican hands, the Texian Navy is forced to operate in the vicinity of Galveston. They are unable to deliver men and materials to Houston's retreating army further down the coast, forcing the remainder to go overland from Galveston Bay, a much longer and tedious route. As the war moves east, whoever controls Galveston will have the advantage. With that in mind, both sides are formulating plans that involves the island port. The next day, March 14th, Ramirez y Sesma's column reaches the charred ruins of the once defiant town of Gonzales. With the town smoldering, the Mexicans continue their march east, following in the footsteps of the retreating rebels. At the same time, the northern column under Guyana is making a beeline for Bastrop. Meanwhile, in the south, Urrea destroys 2 isolated Texian detachments at the Battle of Fulio. 5 days later on the 19th, Urrea catches up and captures Fannon's retreating force at the Battle of Coleto Creek. The next day, on the southern bank of the Colorado, Ramirez y Sesma and his column of 800 approaches the flooded river, just opposite Houston's camp at Beeson's Crossing. Agitated about retreating without a chance of finding the enemy, Houston's men clamor for an attack against the Mexicans. Despite outnumbering the enemy almost 2-1, circumstances prevent Houston from crossing the river. Knowing that the rebels are across the river, Ramirez y Sesma entrenched his force and emplaced his 2 cannons facing the river. If the Texians attack, they would have to cross the overflowing river in the face of the Mexican guns, a maneuver even hazardous for trained troops, let alone for his inexperienced volunteers. With no better option, Houston holds his men in camp in spite of their anger. On March 26, with events going against him, Houston receives the first reports of Fannon's defeat and capture. The disastrous news greatly depresses the general. With Fannon out of the picture, Houston and his small army are the last hope for the Republic of Texas. If he fails, Texas will be lost. Not wanting to risk his army against unfavorable odds, Houston orders a retreat to San Felipe without giving battle, driving almost 300 men to leave the army with or without authorization. Those who stay whisper amongst themselves that the army would be better off with a new general who would fight the enemy they scorn. Though the anger is not unfounded, Houston's men do not know the strategic circumstances that surround his decision-making. Stationed on the Colorado, Houston could be double enveloped by the forces of Ouray and Victoria and Guyon and Bastrop, who are not checked like Sesma. Even if he attacks Sesma, there is doubt that his men will come out victorious in the fight. Houston's only prudent course of action is retreat and hope he has a chance to strike a decisive blow against Santa Anna's forces. The same river that stopped Ramirez y Sesma from crossing has stopped both Guyona and Ouray from pressing on with their advance. The timely arrival of the spring rains in Texas have rendered Houston an unprecedented amount of time to move east, allowing the Texians to reach San Felipe unimpeded on March 28th. However, despite their apparent safety, Houston orders to retreat to Grosh's plantation the next day, abandoning San Felipe to the enemy. As the orders filter down the ranks, the general receives more protests from the men about leaving one of the most important Texian settlements to the Mexicans, even with 2 companies outright refusing to retreat any further. Rather than forcing the detractors to move, Houston wisely orders those companies to defend the river crossings. On the 29th, the Texian army, shrunk down to 500 men, marches north of Grosh's plantation. However, in the wake of the departure, flames rise up in the town. Nobody knows who exactly started the flames, but nevertheless, the town is burned to the ground. On March 31st, after 2 days of marching, the weary Texans reach the relative safety of Grosh's plantation. Despite having to camp out in the soggy bottomlands of the Brazos River, it will prove to be a safe haven for Houston's men to rest and recuperate. Houston will wisely use this time to train his men in the rudiments of linear warfare and gather more reinforcements, preparing his men for their destined showdown with the Mexicans. Back in Behar, Santa Anna and his officers finally leave for the front at the end of March. 4 days later, the president reaches the combined forces of Tolosa and Ramirez y Sesma, who are still encamped on the south side of the Colorado. Despite his leisurely stay at Behar, the Napoleon of the West is once again his old dynamic self, more than ready to finish the campaign once and for all, driving his men across the Colorado in the wake of the fleeing rebels. On April 7th, at the head of his men, Santa Anna arrives at the smoldering ruins of San Felipe, the once prosperous capital of Austin's colony. However, the general is unable to press any further as a company of Texians are preventing him from crossing the Brazos. The Mexicans try to force their way across but are stopped by the accurate fire of the Texian riflemen. During the engagement, the Mexicans capture a rebel who informs Santa Anna that Houston's force is encamped at Grosh's plantation, only 20 miles away. Not wanting to be delayed any further, Santa Anna leaves Sesma to deal with the Texians, and on April 12th leads to Losa 12 miles south of Thompson's Ferry. Here they capture the ferry, enabling Santa Anna to get his men across the river, forcing the Texians to finally give up their stubborn defense and retreat north. Just as Santa Anna's army crosses the Brazos, coming events will entirely change his campaign. At Fort Bend, the general learns from the Anglo civilians that the Texian government is on the run. Ever since Houston abandoned San Felipe, the Texian government has fled Washington on the Brazos for safer ground east. President Burnett and his entourage has moved to Harrisburg and is planning to sell to Galveston Island to be protected by the Texian Navy. Instead of going after Houston's army, which has done nothing but flee from him, Santa Anna changes direction and marches toward the defenseless rebel government. If he can capture the Texian leadership here, he will finish off the rebellion once and for all. On April 14th, Santa Anna dispatches orders to all his scattered elements to rally at San Felipe. Instead of waiting for his army to reform, the general takes 700 soldiers and heads straight for Harrisburg through the rain and mud. After almost a full day of marching, the Mexican force reaches the temporary capital of Texas at midnight on April 15th. Once he arrives in the town, the general is informed by the locals that the Texian government has fled to New Washington mere hours before they arrived. Angry that he missed them again, Santa Anna sends Colonel Almonte and a detachment of cavalry to intercept the fleeing politicians. However, Colonel Almonte misses the group by mere yards as they flee in a boat towards Galveston. As they come upon the boats, the Mexican dragoons are about to fire on the rebel politicians, but are stopped by the chivalrous Colonel Almonte from shooting into the group, which contains women. On the 18th, Santa Anna burns Harrisburg to the ground and marches east to New Washington, only to discover the officials had escaped again. In his frustration, Santa Anna orders New Washington to be burned as well. Despite the rebel government having fled his men, Santa Anna is satisfied they had been pushed off the Texas mainland. With the Texian politicians gone, Santa Anna turns his sights back to Sam Houston and his army at Gross's plantation. However, in his hurried rush to capture the Texian government, Santa Anna has unknowingly isolated himself from the rest of his forces. His force stands alone on the southern banks of the San Jacinto River. Meanwhile, at Gross's plantation, Houston readies his men to break camp after 2 weeks of continuous training. Thanks to the needed delay, the army has regained its strength, which boasts a sizable force of 950 men. Houston divides his army into 3 regiments of infantry, 1 regiment of cavalry, and a battalion of artillery. The artillery consists of 2 iron cannons donated by the generous people of Cincinnati, Ohio. Being the only artillery in the entire army, the men fondly call them the Twin Sisters. Despite the progress made at Gross's plantation in rebuilding the army, President Burnett is dissatisfied with his commander-in-chief for their lack of action against the enemy. To rouse Houston into action, Burnett sends Secretary of War Thomas Jefferson Rusk to deliver a personal letter scathing his inaction. "Sir, the enemy are laughing you to scorn. You must fight them. You must retreat no further. The salvation of the country depends on your doing so." After reviewing the strategic situation, Secretary Rusk sides with the general. Luckily for Houston, he receives word that Santa Anna, in command of only 750 men, is marching to Harrisburg to capture the fleeing government. Looking at his maps, the general realizes he can intercept Santa Anna at Lynch's Ferry, on the banks of the San Jacinto River. This is the exact moment he has been waiting for ever since he retreated from Gonzales. He finally has a chance to take on Santa Anna in a battle that favors his men, and if possible, capture the President of Mexico. On April 12th, Houston breaks camp and moves his army east towards Harrisburg. After a few days on the road, the Texian army reaches a major crossroads on April 16th. As they near the crossroads, many of the men ponder where they are heading, whether it's north towards Nacogdoches in safety, or south towards Harrisburg and the looming Mexican army. Before Houston can issue orders, the volunteers take over and lead the army along the road south to Harrisburg. Once the men and the rest of the column realize where they're heading, they begin to cheer, and the band strikes a tune. With their turn south, the Texians are heading straight towards the battle they have been longing for. After another 2 days of marching, the Texian army reaches the charred ruins of Harrisburg on April 18th. Knowing that Santa Anna will not remain isolated for long, Houston needs to strike the Mexican force as soon as possible. Luckily for the general, D. Smith captures a Mexican courier carrying a message that indicates that Santa Anna is heading their way, along with further reinforcements. With a fight looming, Houston assembles his men into a hollow square and from atop his white stallion, gives a rousing speech to his men. The army will cross Buffalo Bayou and we will meet the enemy. Some of us may be killed and must be killed, but soldiers, victory is certain. Trust in God and fear not. The victims of the Alamo and the names of those who were murdered at Goliad cry out for vengeance. Remember the Alamo, remember Goliad. Inspired by Houston's speech, the men left Harrisburg the next day and energetically raced east across the bayou to Lynch's Ferry along Buffalo Bayou. On the 20th, Houston wakes his men at daybreak and continues the aggressive march toward Lynch's Ferry. When reports arrive of Mexicans in the area, Houston quickens the pace until he reaches the ferry. Being the first to arrive, Houston carefully chooses his campsite, a grove of trees along the bayou that will hide his numbers. Though the general finally found land that favors his riflemen, he has left his men no room to escape. For Houston and his men, it is truly victory or death. Compared to the Texians, the landscape is considerably alien to the Mexicans, not like the vast prairies or mountains that many of Santa Anna's soldiers are accustomed to. However, despite the lack of knowledge of the landscape, Santa Anna knows his final objective is just across the field. If he can beat Houston here, the rebellion is finished. Once he arrives on the field, Santa Anna decides to place his camp in a clearing bordering woods and marshes, worrying many of his officers who deem the site vulnerable. Despite both camps being adjacent to the other, they are hidden by a slight ridge in the middle of the field. Without a clear line of sight, Santa Anna does not know Houston's exact location. Thus, the general orders a probe in the direction of where the Texian pickets have been sighted. As the Mexican skirmishers advance upon the supposed Texian position, they are sent reeling by the blast from the twin sisters, revealing Houston's position in the trees. The man commanding these guns is Lieutenant Colonel James C. Neal, the man who has been in almost every major fight since Gonzales. Countering the Texian artillery fire is the single cannon brought to the field by the Mexicans, which they call the Golden Standard, commanded by Colonel Pedro Delgado. During the exchange of fire, both sides draw blood. Ultimately, the Golden Standard is outgunned and forced to withdraw out of range of the twins. Encouraged by the flight of the Mexicans, the Texian infantry goads their commander into attacking. Houston, on the other hand, does not want to reveal his entire force to the enemy and refuses to order the attack. However, the general compromises and allows Colonel Sherman to take the cavalry on a reconnaissance. Yet, just as Sherman comes within view of the Mexicans, he orders a full-on charge against their dragoons. The two sides clash in a heated melee with rifles, swords, and lances. Once they are locked in combat, the superior arms of the Mexican horsemen take effect, and soon they get the better of the fight. Secretary Rusk, who attached himself to the cavalry, is almost killed. Luckily, Maribel Lamar, a private in the cavalry, sees what is happening and charges into the fight at the last second to save the secretary. As the cavalry melee ensues, the Texian infantry helplessly watches from the protection of the trees. Sherman, seeing the trouble, calls for infantry support. Houston, on the other hand, once again refuses. Some of the men, however, are done with Houston's timidity and order their companies forward to support their comrades. Witnessing this insubordination, Houston angrily orders the men back to the trees, but they refuse. Once the Mexican dragoons see the infantry advance, they break off the fight and gallop back to their lines. But before either side could return, a boy named Walter Lane is almost captured by riding into the midst of the Mexican dragoons. Just like Rusk, Lamar sees Lane in danger and swoops in to save the boy. As both sides ride back to the lines, the gallant combatants commend each other for their exploits. Houston, watching from the safety of the trees, is livid at the blatant insubordination from his men. When the men return to the camp, Sherman is reprimanded for his actions and returns to the infantry. Lamar, for his bouts of heroism, is given command of the cavalry. The volunteers are just as furious with their commander for holding them back from engaging the Mexicans. Despite the raging emotions, Houston keeps his cool and personally beats Tattoo to send everybody to bed. For the rest of the night, Houston carefully plans the next day's actions. Across the field, Napoleon of the West realizes how precarious his position is. The general calls on all nearby units to converge on Lynch's Ferry. If Houston attacks before reinforcements arrive, his small force might be overwhelmed. To protect his position, Santa Anna orders a barricade to be built overnight facing the Texians. Those forced to stay awake anxiously anticipate a night attack, but to their relief, no attack is forthcoming. A new day dawns on April 21st. Many on both sides expect a major fight to ensue. In the Texian camp, the restless Texians wake up early only to find their commander still asleep. As morning wears on, many start to get agitated by the lack of urgency displayed by their commander. To make matters worse, reports come back about Coase arriving on the field to reinforce Santa Anna with an extra 500 men, raising his strength to 1,250 men. Now that they have lost a numerical advantage, many Texians are on the verge of mutiny if their commander dallies any longer. Across the field, the Mexican camp is suspiciously quiet. Expecting an attack all night, Santa Anna kept his men up building fortifications, and by now they are dead tired. If the Texians did not attack last night before Coase arrived, there is no way Houston will attack now that Coase is present. With that in mind, Santa Anna allows his men to rest. Yet, unlike their general, Castrillon and his fellow officers are not as confident that the Texians will remain passive. Knowing that further reinforcements will surely arrive in the next few days, Houston sends D. Smith and a squad of men to destroy Vince's Bridge 5 miles to the west, preventing any further Mexican reinforcements. Meanwhile, Houston holds a council of war and tells his officers of his plan to attack Santa Anna. By 3 p.m., with all the officers in agreement, the Texians ready themselves for the attack. Unlike the Napoleonic-sized battles with immaculate lines of infantry, cavalry, and artillery of the past 4 decades, the Texian force forming at San Jacinto is the furthest thing from it. Houston's force contains a motley crew of frontiersmen, townsfolk, U.S. Army deserters, militiamen, and Federalist Tejanos. The one thing that binds these men together is their desire to fight and avenge those who fell at the Alamo and at Goliad. Houston forms his line of battle with Sherman's 2nd Regiment on the left flank, then Burleson's 1st Regiment, Neal's artillery, Milledge's regulars, and finally Lamar's cavalry on the right flank. Among the cavalry is Captain Seguin and 19 Tejanos, who just like their Anglo comrades, eagerly want to get rid of Santa Anna and his centralist forces. However, to ensure their fellow Texians will not mistake them, the Tejanos put pieces of cardboard in their hats to distinguish them from the enemy. At 4 p.m., Houston orders the advance. The entire Texian line steps off toward their foe, who remains auspiciously quiet. As the force is marching, D. Smith and his squad ride up and declare that Vince's Bridge is down, the fight they have been clamoring for since Gonzales has finally arrived. The hardship of marching hundreds of miles through mud and swamps has come to this. It is time for the Texians to conquer or die. Luckily, their advance is completely concealed by the grassy ridge in the middle of the field. The sleeping Mexicans have no idea the Texians are rapidly advancing on their position. At 4:30 p.m., the twin sisters reach the top of the ridge, drop tail, and fire into the Mexican camp. The Battle of San Jacinto has begun. With the blast of the sisters, Lamar, in command of the cavalry, leads a charge into the Mexican left flank, scattering the men in mere minutes. Meanwhile, the infantry under Houston advances until they come within range of the Mexican barricade. Once there, the Texians let loose a destructive volley into the stunned Mexican ranks. Houston tries to get his men to stay and reload, but their blood is up. Without orders, the men break ranks and surge toward the Mexican camp. During the charge, Houston is shot in the ankle as his men charge forward over the barricade. Wielding club rifles, pistols, hatchets, bayonets, and bowie knives, the Texians throw themselves upon the Mexican line as they let loose their vengeful battle cry, "Remember the Alamo! Remember Goliad!" The surprise is complete. Though various Mexican officers try to organize a coherent defense, the sudden attack catches them completely off guard. Delgado recalls that utmost confusion prevailed. Those who try to resist the Texian onslaught are hacked down as the rest flee in absolute terror. In the end, the Mexican officers have lost complete control of their men. Santa Anna, witnessing a disaster, strips himself of his general's uniform and flees the scene. In one of the final acts of the battle, General Castellon, the gallant officer who tried to save Crockett's life at the Alamo, is gunned down in moments when he refuses to yield in the face of the onrushing tide of Texians. After a mere 18 minutes, the battle is over, but the slaughter has only just begun. Many fall to the feet of their attackers and cry, "Me no Alamo, me no Goliad," but the cries fall on deaf ears. If the Texians understood what they were saying, they did not care. For the rest of the day, the Texians will chase down and kill any Mexican they can get their hands upon. Those who survive the initial assault run in all directions. Most flee south into Peggy's Lake, floundering in the muddy water. The Texians chase them to the bank and shoot anybody who dare to come up for air. Houston and his officers try to restrain their men, but to no avail. Nothing will stop their vengeful fury that has been compounding for months. Only when they are utterly exhausted in the rival night does the bloodletting finally come to an end. By the end of the day, around 650 Mexicans have been killed at San Jacinto, while another 500 men are captured. Conversely, the Texians suffered only 11 killed and 30 wounded. The Texians have won a great victory, but without the capture of Santa Anna, it is not a complete victory. The force defeated at San Jacinto is merely a portion of the entire Mexican force in Texas. If Santa Anna is not captured soon, the Texians might have to once again retreat in the face of the Mexican army. Houston, suffering from his wound, waits anxiously all night for news of Santa Anna. Luckily, after many hours of searching, Santa Anna is found hiding in the marshes nearby in the morning. When he is brought before Houston, the men surround the general, calls for his execution, but Houston has other plans. In exchange for his life, Santa Anna orders all his forces to retreat to Behar. General Filisola, now the ranking general in the Mexican army, not only follows Santa Anna's order to retreat, but withdraws the army south of the Rio Grande, despite Udre and others urging him to continue the advance. With the major military defeat suffered by Santa Anna, soldiers unaccustomed to the inclement Texas weather, and dysentery rampaging through the army, Filisola sees no better option than to retreat to friendlier territory. Though Houston has won a great victory, many in the government still fear another Mexican invasion. As the news spread of Houston's astounding victory, thousands of volunteers fled into Texas to join his ranks, ready to fight, but no engagements are forthcoming. A month after the battle on May 14, 1836, Houston and Santa Anna signed the Treaty of Velasco, which ends the hostilities in Texas. Despite Santa Anna's agreement, the Mexican government claims that Santa Anna was coerced into signing the treaty, nullifying its effects. Mexico will never recognize Texas as an independent country, claiming one day they will return to reassert power. The Mexican government will try many times to form a new army to invade Texas, yet none will come to fruition due to the lack of funds and political fallout regarding the loss at San Jacinto. The Texas Revolution should have ended in defeat. The Texians were deficient in almost everything necessary for war: soldiers, horses, artillery, supplies, and support facilities. With a vast numerical superiority and many lines of advance, all Santa Anna had to do was march on in and quell the rebellion. Despite that, the Texians prevailed thanks to their determination and particularly their advanced weaponry. With their rifles able to hit their targets at longer ranges, they were able to outshoot their Mexican counterpart, giving the outnumbered Texians the technological edge they desperately needed. The expert use of American-made rifles allowed them to dominate almost every confrontation. In nearly every battle, the Texians were outmanned and outgunned, forcing them to fight with a greater level of determination if they wanted to win. The Texians knew what was at stake if they lost, which encouraged them to fight harder. This is in part thanks to Santa Anna and his brutal treatment of captured soldiers. If Santa Anna treated the Texians with mercy, he would have shown the world that he was simply restoring order in a rebellious province, thus enticing rebels to give up the fight. Yet, with the destruction of the Alamo and the mass execution at Goliad, Santa Anna instilled a vengeful fury in the hearts of the Texians, who stopped at nothing until they achieved ultimate victory, which they did on the banks of the San Jacinto. 6 months later, General Sam Houston, the victor of San Jacinto and the deliverer of the nation, is elected the first president of the Republic of Texas. Over the next decade, he and 2 other presidents will shape the future of Texas, from combating native raids and Mexican incursions to internal strife. Ultimately, it will not be Texas deciding its future but its larger cousin to the east, the United States. During the years of the Texas Republic, the US waged a political battle in Congress to annex this young nation into the country. Finally, after a decade of lobbying American politicians, Texas became the 28th state. With Texas's annexation into the United States, many would think that the years of bloodshed is behind them, but that is not to be. As news of the annexation reaches its southern neighbor, Mexican troops cross into the disputed territory and attack American troops under Zachary Taylor, who just arrived to defend the new southern border, kicking off a 2-year-long continent-wide war, the Mexican-American War.